everybody. Hello, hello. I'm Marika, Executive Director of the Cambridge Historical Society, and I'm pleased to have here with me Beth Folsom, who is our program manager. Beth is going to give a little overview, a very quick tutorial on Zoom, just to give us all some points. Beth?
Hey, thanks, Marika. So for this event, we are going to be muting all audience members, but you are part of the event. We can't stress that enough. So please share your thoughts and your comments on the chat box, and I'll be monitoring that and relaying those to Marika as we go along. We'll also be asking show of hand questions. If your video is on, you can simply raise your hand, or you can use the reactions option at the bottom of the Zoom window. Your video will be on, but you have the option, of course, to turn it off when you do this, and no one will be able to see you. And this event is being recorded. We're very excited to preserve it for posterity and put it on our YouTube channel later on. So please be sure your name is accurate as displayed, and if you need to change it, you can right-click on your name and enter in a new name. And finally, this is a social event, and we are here to have fun, so food and drink are encouraged. So go ahead and raise a glass.
Thanks, Beth. So yeah, test out your newfound Zoom skills, type your name in, and then also just an opening question, an icebreaker that we like to do. Necco wafers, yes or no?
Yes.
Yummy or gross? Oh,
Yes.
yay, Robin.
The licorice.
Yes. Zolan, where do you fall on this?
You said Necco wafers?
Necco wafers.
Yeah, definitely, because the factory used to be in Cambridgeport, right?
Well, look at this.
Right near Central Square. Yeah, I lived right near it.
Not a pop quiz, but just a testing. So yeah.
Only on gingerbread roofs. Only on gingerbread house roofs.
Oh, only on gingerbread house roofs. So that's all right. Cool. Well, thanks everyone for participating. We'll be asking more questions along the way. Feel free to use the chat box and reactions. Feel free to give them a test right now to make sure they're working. But yeah, we're so excited to see everybody. This is our second event in our brand new series, Shaped by Cambridge. We're here to talk with famous or infamous folks from our city about how this place has influenced them. We know that, yes, history lives in books and documents and buildings, but we believe it also lives in all of us, and we need to share that history to learn from each other and ultimately make a better city. So we are planning a second series, so please be thinking who else should be featured in this series. Yes, Elizabeth Warren. Yes, Mindy Kaling. If you play poker with these folks on Tuesday nights, like put in a good word for us. But otherwise, like send me some ideas. Looking for more folks. This has been so fun. So before we begin, I do want to acknowledge that the places where the Society works and gathers are on the traditional land of the Massachusetts people. Feel free to add in the chat an acknowledgement appropriate for where you live, because I know some folks are calling us from other places. So we're grateful to not only our guests, Robin and Zolan, but to all of you, all of our supporters and members. It means so much to us that you give generously of your time and money. We don't take that lightly. As an organization, we are committed to exploring with you how the past influences the present in order to shape a better future. We're doing history not at you, but with you. So I'd like to just give a little shout out to tonight's corporate sponsors, because without them, we couldn't do a lot of our work. IRB Real Estate, Cambridge Savings Bank, S&H Construction, the Harder Group, Cambridge 7, and Cambridge Trust. So a big thank you to those folks. Yay! So without further ado, I'm going to introduce tonight's speaker. So I have a little, all right. I kind of can't believe that I have to do an introduction for Robin. It seems kind of silly because Robin is so well known and loved. When just talking to people about this whole series, people just went gaga over Robin, like, oh my God, Robin, like I gotta do it. So in any case, Robin's the co-host of NPR and WBUR's daily program Here and Now. She's a Peabody Award-winning documentary filmmaker who's also reported for NBC, CBS, and ABC television, and many more. An introduction, here it is. It's superfluous, but here it is. And I just wanted just a quick show of hands. How many people have given money to BUR because Robin's asked them? Yes, 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 yeah.
1-800-909. Marika, I have to say, this town is so wonderfully small and dense that your husband worked with me at WBUR, Kurt. So we're all tied together.
It's a very small time. I was actually remembering, when was the first time I met Robin? I don't know that you'll remember, but it was like a dozen years ago. Kurt had just moved here and we met at a house party in Cambridge. I think it was probably Bianca's house. And you were just like, Kurt had just moved here from South Dakota. And I was like, oh yeah, I'm here with Kurt, whatever. We just met. And Robin's like, it's destiny. He moved here to meet you. And I was like, okay, like we just started dating. But anyway, here we are, married 10 years. So
I was right.
You were totally right. Anyway, we're excited that Robin's here. Thank you, Robin. So we're also very excited. This is a family affair tonight. We have with us her nephew, Zolan Kanno-Youngs. He's a Homeland Security correspondent for the New York Times. He was just doing an interview right before he joined us. So thank you to both of you on your chaotic news days for joining us. He covers the Department of Homeland Security, immigration, border issues, and more. He's previously reported for the Wall Street Journal, USA Today, the Boston Globe, and others. He graduated from Northeastern here in Boston, and he grew up in Cambridge. He got his start in journalism at the Register Forum, the student paper at Cambridge, Rindge, and Latin. In his spare time, he works on screenplays, including the short film Jahar. And it was just about 2 years ago that Zolan and his film partner, Henry Hayes, and Robin joined us at the Brattle Theater for a screening of the film. And that was part of our year, Where is Cambridge From? And it was just a remarkable evening. Local history done right, I think, in my opinion. And I know a lot of other people just really, really enjoyed that. So excited to have you both back here tonight. So thank you both for joining us.
Thank you.
Yay.
Well, we have to say, don't we, Zol, that his mom is here in the
My
lineup.
mom
Julie
is
is
here
here.
as well. Yeah.
So the evening is.
I don't know if her camera is on anywhere, but
Hooray for moms.
Of course.
A Cambridge legend. If
Yes.
anybody walks in Central Square, then they probably see her at some point or know of her, but yes.
Okay, infamous. Well, all moms are welcome all the time. So I guess I just wanted to start with a question about identity. We're talking about Cambridge. So when you're traveling and someone asks you where you're from, what do you tell them?
Zol.
You can go first. You can go first.
Well, I say I'm from Cambridge, Mass. I am a Cantabrigian, but a lot of people know. And hi, Frank. It's so nice to see so many friendly faces. I'm a New Yorker, actually, which how I ever got let in here, I don't know. So it's I feel like a Cantabrigian now as I sip from my tags, Cambridge Squares cup. But it's by way of New York. So I am not as pure as Zolan.
Oh, great segue. Okay. I say strongly I'm from Cambridge. Anytime I travel throughout the country or even in DC, people will, when they hear Northeastern, will sometimes say, oh, you're from Boston. I make it a point to say, no, I'm actually not from Boston. I'm from Cambridge. The only times I went to Boston growing up was to go to like the movies in Downtown Crossing or to go to like a Red Sox or Celtics game. I find it to be completely different ways of growing up based off of my experience at Northeastern from a lot of the people I met and just hearing about their experiences. I always say specifically Cambridge.
Isn't that on your Twitter feed and everything?
It's on my Twitter bio. It's on my New York Times bio. I did like a Northeastern alumni thing recently, and they want you to say where you're from. And I said Cambridge, not Boston specifically. It's
so interesting. So I'd love if anybody wants to toss in the chat box. If you identify the same way. I know a lot of people, like, we'll go somewhere and my husband will say, like, oh, we're from Boston. And I'm like, are we? Like, that's not where we live. I just think that's such an interesting marker of a piece of your identity. So feel free to toss some thoughts there in the chat box. Well, that's a great segue because the point of this this interview is shaped by Cambridge. So how has Cambridge shaped you? I assume that has meant something to you, or else you would not have agreed to join us this evening. But yeah, like I did, Zolan, notice that you put Cambridgian in your Twitter feed, and I just want to hear more, I guess, whoever wants to go first, just about just a little background, you know, center us. What has been your Cambridge experience? How long have you lived here, et cetera? So who wants to go first?
Yeah, I mean, I think just since you mentioned, you know, kind of putting Cambridge in it, I mean, to build off of it a bit, I mean, I think when it's a different experience growing up, and I think it really starts with the school system for one, right? I mean, I don't mean in terms of merit as much as I do just in the fact that there's one public high school in this town. There's also few middle schools and few elementary schools. So what that means is from, you know, kindergarten to after school, I mean, I could have the same friends from kindergarten to after school all the way through high school. I don't think that's an experience you get in a lot of other places. You know, when I went to college, and really throughout it, you hear a lot of people saying, well, don't worry, your college friends will be kind of your friends for life, you know, whereas with high school in your hometown, that may not be necessarily the case. And I could not feel any different. I mean, my best friends are still friends I made at Kennedy Longfellow or King Open or Cambridge Rindge and Latin. And I think that's specifically what I mean. You know, I look forward to going home on Thanksgiving. I don't see it as like a burden. And I mean, that's not just because I get to see, you know, my family, my aunt, my mom, but I really look forward to seeing my old, you know, friends at Rindge. And there's a certain way I think, you know, just I keep going back to school with it, but just from what I've heard, you know, from my friends that grow up in other places, including Boston, it's just not the same in terms of the conversations that you're having, the subjects that you're covering. An AP Lang class might not necessarily be just preparing for the AP exam, but you might explore, you know, different philosophies. You might just have a day where you talk about current events. That's what I associate, you know, that with, not to make it all rosy, but, you know, those are at least the things I'm very, very proud of. Definitely.
Right on. I'd love to know in the chat box, folks that are grads of CRLS. That'd be really interesting to see. And Zolan, I'm sure plenty of us can't help but notice the Cambridge map behind your head.
Oh, yeah. I didn't put that up before this started.
It's always been there.
Yes. Yeah.
I want to mention one thing.
Sure.
When I got involved in Zolan's life, you know, as the aunt, I don't have children of my own. These are all borrowed props. And when I got involved with Zolan's life, I thought, well, I have to, his mom can attest to this. You know, as an aunt, I have to put him in a private school, right? Because that's what I'm supposed to do. And I remember how old were you? You were like in 7th grade or something? No, you're like in 6th grade or something.
You're going to bring up the sabotage.
Yeah. So I thought, well, this is what I'll take him, this earnest little kid. And he's like, I'm not going to a private school. I am going to Cambridge Rindge and Latin. And he'd spend his whole, you know, young life, his goal was to get to Cambridge Rindge and Latin. I'm like, oh yes, dear, that's great. But let's go talk to people at Buckingham, Brown and Nichols, BB&N. Or let's go talk to the Commonwealth, right? I don't even remember. I just kept thinking that's what I'm supposed to do. And we'd have all the interviews and everything. And then they'd ask me to leave from all these private schools. And I'd leave and I'd come back and they'd say, he didn't want to come here. He wants to go to CRLS. He sabotaged every single interview that he had. I mean, you had this, I mean, not that I even knew what I was doing, but you had this North Star of Rindge, you know, since you were a little kid.
Well, I think you're right. And I think not to get too far ahead, but I saw the benefit immediately when I went to college too. Because I think that you hear a lot of people when they go back after their freshman year to talk about their first year's experience, they say, you know, the real big thing that I loved was meeting so many different people. You know, I finally got out of my hometown and I got to meet people from all over the world. And I found out a little bit about myself. I mean, I felt like I was, and I don't mean this in a condescending way, but just full candor. I mean, I felt like I was a little bit a leg up in terms of that socially, that I was a bit further in the kind of maturization process. You know, I was able to I already had experienced meeting people from all over the world, and, had friends that were, came from refugee families or were just here on it, had just immigrated here, or even beyond just demographics and race. You also are kind of, have experience with friends from different socioeconomic classes too. And you can just notice the guys that don't have that, I think. And that's not to say that's a Cambridge exclusive thing, but I definitely think it's a benefit of growing
Oh, you
up.
were so right. I mean, you were so right.
Yeah.
So tell us about where in Cambridge was home for you.
You can go first.
Me? I'm over outside Harvard Square. And I have been here since about, 82, 83. I had been in Boston downtown in the 70s, and then I'd gone away and I'd lived in New York, and then I came back and I rented with a wonderful person here, and then I bought a unit. This was back when everyone's saying, oh, you don't want to live anywhere, in an urban area, and it was just the smartest thing I ever did. And I would say, while Zolan's talking about the influence of the schools, which is just huge, I mean, his mom and I, watched that up close. I would say, to answer the question, how Cambridge has shaped me, is through the women I've met here. It really jumps out. And many of them are older now. Many of them are in their 90s now. But there's just a group of women, a lot of you may know some of them. One we've lost, but Eaton Fales, who, in her 80s and early 90s would sit out in her bikini and tan and put her protest signs up. Just a gloriously outspoken individual. And Priscilla McMillan, who was at the Davis Center, a Russian expert, and Pebble Gifford, and then Linda Cabot Black. When I try to think, well, what's the most shaping aspect of Cambridge outside of being able to be through some of Zolan's school experiences, and now his brother Odin is at Ringe. I would say that's how Cambridge shaped me. These extraordinary women, independent, full-throated, smart, intellectual, but also fun. And there's a lot of them here, as it turns out. Like, the place is silly with these great, strong, older women. And on my block, I would say that's, sort of like that's who I want to be when I grow up. And kind of, I'm getting closer to that. So far, I haven't achieved that goal yet, but that's really how Cambridge has shaped me.
So what about Cambridge do you think made that possible?
Well, I think, as I said, I'm thinking of other women that I admire here, Rachel Solom, and, just women that I've met here, Jean Fechtheimer. Just, it's a place where I feel that women are a major part of it and an equal part of it. And until I had to think about, what I would say, I didn't really put it that pointedly. But Nicola Williams, there's just great, strong, older, aging beautifully and with dignity women here.
Right on. Well, this has the theme, our 2020 theme is Who Are Cambridge Women? Got a little sidetracked by COVID, but we still did some really interesting stuff this year. So it does warm my cold heart to hear you say that.
Yeah.
Zolan, tell us about where in Cambridge was home.
I'm from the Port, so Area 4, around Central Square. It's where I grew up with my mom and my brother. And of course, with my aunt, as a guiding force in Harvard Square as well. This kind of goes back to your first question about what shaped us too. I'm just thinking about my aunt's answer too. When you talk about where I grew up, I also think it's somewhat, I don't know, I was just always present in Central Square, kind of growing up, like in a really good way. I feel like to the point where when I got to middle school and high school or even college and I would come back to Cambridge, I would like walk by some of the businesses and like people would recognize me or I'd recognize them. And we'd talk about like when I was little and my mom would bring me by like for dinner over there. And I can like recall so many interesting conversations as a kid, like at, I'm forgetting what the Indian restaurant is in Central Square, but like that and the Middle East and, all these just really cool businesses as well. I grew up a lot near the Margaret Fuller House and the Area 4 Youth Center and the YWCA Summer Camp and CADC Summer Camp. I did Terrascope Youth Radio with Robin's dear friend Beverly. So I think of that as well when I think of kind of the home of shaping me. So Central Square specifically.
I just have to say, just jump in. I'm looking at the chats and Jan Ferrara, to your question, Marika, about why do you think that is? And I think this might be in response to that. Radcliffe. I hadn't thought of that because the women that I mentioned were not, but Rain, one of my neighbors, is very tied to it. Susan Ware, the historian at Radcliffe. And so, that probably had something to do with it. Yeah.
Smart ladies congregating together.
Yeah.
I love it. Zolan, it's interesting, hearing about you growing up in the Port, and we've been this past year doing an oral history project with Margaret Fuller Neighborhood House.
Oh yeah,
been fascinating and wonderful. And what an amazing organization for Cambridge. It's interesting. We heard a lot of those folks in their interviews talk about there being a line where you couldn't cross into East Cambridge. And I'm wondering if that's an experience you had, that you felt like all of Cambridge was your home. I've had folks say that they actually never come out to West Cambridge. The Historical Society is building on Brattle Street. Some folks have said they've grown up in Cambridge and would never come out here. Just wondering what.
Yeah, I think that's a reality. Definitely. I mean, look, I love this place. I mean, I love it, but it is not, it does not escape some of the, I think societal kind of trends that we see, right? I mean, there's still segregation in Cambridge. I mean, there's still, I think there's still dividing lines that divide you depending on, your class status as well. And I think what's great is you're actually exposed to that from a young age because everyone's going, or for the most part, going to public schools, right? At least I was. So I was aware of that from a young age. I mean, I had a mom who, and this is not to say that it all comes down to, whether a parent is committed to doing this, because I know there's barriers that prevent people from, folks from actually being able to cross these lines. But I had a mom that worked really hard to also make sure that there wasn't going to be a neighborhood that I wasn't allowed to go to or didn't feel comfortable going to. So, I very much credit her for that. But does that mean that I didn't feel uncomfortable at times? I mean, definitely, right? I mean, West Cambridge isn't that black. I mean, I'm sorry, it's not. And it's also probably doesn't do the best job in making people that look like me feel too comfortable. As far as the Port to East Cambridge thing, I think that might have to do a bit more with tension with people around our age. I mean, I went to like King Open, moved to East Cambridge at one point. I didn't feel too much hostility there. I mean, for me, the real times I noticed it was just, I think there's a beautiful thing about having so many kids from different classes in one school, and that's that you see different experiences and you're exposed to it from a young age. The tough thing can be as well, you also realize the things that you don't have from a really young age. And I think that a lot of my friends have voiced that. I think I probably felt it at times when I was younger, but at the same time, I personally, I also think I benefited from a certain amount of privilege as well.
Mm-hmm, mm-hmm. I want to talk about how you're both journalists and you're both in this city. And how do you think about Cambridge with that eye? Do you turn it off, or are you always do you have your ear to the ground with Cambridge issues, or is that just not something you think about?
You can go ahead.
And I want to say that we have another journalist in Cambridge. Zolan's cousin, another niece of mine, Dealyn Dwyer, is with Boston.com. and very, very proud of her. It's interesting because I'm now with a national program. I find myself, I will listen for trends and things. I mean, everything I know about how to destroy a square through, chains coming in and raising the rents, and, everything I know is from observing Harvard Square. And so I see stories all the time that are trends, but I'm less likely to follow the inner workings of whoever's mayor or city council, just because it's not something that I will be reporting on. But I absolutely see trends here. And I don't think I ever turn, it's kind of annoying, but someone will tell me a story. I don't know if you experienced this, Sol, because you have a completely incredible beat, but someone will tell me a story and I'll be, oh, that's so interesting. Do you think I can talk to them? And it's annoying, because you see everything as a potential, something that you want to tell other people. But I guess does that make any sense, Zolan? I see trends more than I would see like a specific story of corruption or something.
Yes, I think it does make sense. I mean, you're enterprising, for the most part. I mean, I get what you're saying. So I'm sorry. The question was, can we ever turn it off? And then just more so, do we kind of apply the same reporting stuff when it comes to Cambridge? Was that it? Or?
Yeah.
Okay. Well, I mean, I think my aunt laid out some good context too. Like we have different jobs as well, right? So I'm a beat reporter, and my beat involves some different themes, and themes that are relevant for the election right now. So that's kind of where all my, probably 95% of my focus is, but it's also national. So the tough thing with, I love my job, but I also think, everybody in the New York Times, whether it's the Washington Bureau or headquarters, we always say local journalism is, the heart of American journalism. And it kind of stinks because, I mean, I get it. I mean, I'm sucked in right now, which my aunt is as well, to, national news. And I don't pay as much attention as I would like to kind of the comings and goings and the minutia of, what's going on locally. But as far as turning it off, no, I mean, either. I think that one thing I got from growing up in Cambridge is a sense of curiosity. So I don't want to turn that off. I think that's something that I really try to always have my eyes open, and I'm always trying to listen for potential news nuggets. Maybe a bit different from my aunt in terms of, always looking for trends is a big part of my job is finding also news stories and scoops and breaking news.
Can I brag on you for a second? I'm going to brag on him for a second. So, what I do now, the kind of work that I do, I host a program. We have to put 2 hours on every day. We don't have reporters. We are an NPR program, so we have access to NPR reporters, and there's a whole hierarchy of NPR news chiefs who tell us which reporters and some packages that might come in. But other than that, we are really, and I'm proud of this, it's, at times in my life, I've been sheer enterprising, which is what Zolan is. It's like when I worked for the networks, you couldn't rip a story out of the New York Times and suggest it, right? You had to have sources, and you had to find stories, and it was constantly, finding something that would be a good story before other people had reported on it. Now I'm an aggregator. So now what I do is that I find, this place is covered with newspapers, and I read all different newspapers, and I find great stories, and I credit them if, somebody else has done it, great trends and everything. And that's a lot of what we do. We aggregate all of the news for you. Zolan is doing one of the hardest forms of reporting. He has got to have sources who tell him what's going on the border, or what's going on with, I've got his article today, I put my glasses on, what's going on with H-1B visas, or, what have you heard about this or that? And that is the hardest, where I am so proud of him, because I don't have any sources. in the Trump administration. Nobody talks to me from the Trump administration, and Zolan has to, so he's been here on holidays. His mom will attest to this, and he'll like, well, excuse me. And, it's a source calling to tell him something. So it's a completely different kind of work. It's real, right? So it's real reporting.
Yeah. I would say what you do too is real reporting. Well, it is, but there's different. It's a big industry, which is one of the best parts.
The closest I come right now to I'll say, will Louise Glick, will you talk to me? Kind of thing. Having a phone number for Louise Glick, but who, by the way, yay, Louise, for the Nobel today. But you have to get inside of government agencies.
Right. Yeah. My job is to try and show people, to shed a little light, to show people how the gears are turning in Homeland Security. But yeah, it's one that I obviously was inspired to pursue by somebody on this chat. Two people in this chat, actually. My mom's a great poet as well, and creative writer.
And artist.
So I want to take us in a little bit of a different direction. So if somebody was coming to visit you and you wanted to show them your Cambridge, where would you take them?
Harvard Books, the river, Fresh Pond, go walk around Fresh Pond. And then I gotta say, just my block. The people here, Margaret Ray, Curious George, I first moved here. There's this imperious woman, it's like a fire plug, walking down the street with her dog. And, I was like, she looks like a little monkey. Well, she was a monkey, she was the, Curious George. Her husband modeled Curious George after her. There's Margaret Ray, right in the street. Or I'm telling a guy that I sort of knew because we raked leaves and did, shoveled snow together, and he plays the piano and I can hear him playing the piano. This is like, 40 years ago. And I say to him, you play beautifully. And he says, thank you. I'll keep it up. And the next day I open the paper and it's Leon Kirshner, one of the greatest living composers in the world, debuting a new piece with the BSO. And I tell him he should keep playing the piano. Girl Interrupted, Suzanne, she lived here. It is filled with so many interesting people. So if there was a way to do that, to say, here's my Cambridge, it's people. That's what I do.
I would definitely introduce them to all my friends, who I think embody, that's what makes Cambridge for me. I would take them to the Sacramento Street basketball court, the Y Field. I would take them to the Charles River, but it might be a different area than what
you're talking
about. If anyone graduated from Ringe, they know what I'm talking about. Yeah, those would probably be my spots. Yeah.
Right on. So along those lines, in the before times when we all used to do things together and it was fun, what would be a fun night out with your friends? Where would you go?
The Riv. Sorry, I'm supposed to.
No, go, the Riv.
I would go to the Riv. I would honestly,
Can you elaborate on the Riv?
No.
It would be the Charles River, where every young person goes to, just socialize.
I'm going to need more details as I have a young person who,
I don't know if I knew who that was. I don't know. I don't want to blow the whistle on anybody, but, it would definitely be there. It would be,
can I just say something?
You're gonna laugh. There's my mom talking. Your mom's talking.
Here's your mom. Yeah, you're going to be mortified, but yeah, the Riv. And I've been like, Zolan, I love you so much. And I've been listening to all of this, and the only things I have to say are that Robin has been Zolan's co-parent his whole life and has been an amazing, amazing role model for him. And what defines Cambridge for me is Zolan, actually. and how he has embraced the city.
That's very nice.
Very cool. Very
Yeah.
cool.
So I just wanted to leave it at that before my son kills me. But,
No, thanks for interrupting me. You saved me.
Yeah.
Ferocious mom.
On to you.
Somebody writes "Mom for the win."
Yeah.
yeah. So, it's without this woman, I don't know what I would do. He would still be successful, but Zolan is formidable, and the two of them together are just amazing.
Back at you.
Thank you.
But where else, Zol? Parents want to know.
Well, to be honest with you, for most of my life in Cambridge, I wasn't of age. So, I really.
Do you remember where we went for your driving lessons? Because somebody has mentioned this. One of your driving lessons?
The one that I failed or the one that I passed?
No, not the driver's test.
Oh, okay.
No, you got one block and failed it. No, we went. I'm pretty sure. I know a lot of the kids did, but I'm sure we did also go driving in Mount Auburn Cemetery because I told you can't
Mount
kill
Auburn
anyone.
Cemetery. Yep.
Somebody's writing Mount Auburn Cemetery, an important part of the city. It's a great place to teach kids how to drive.
As everyone's dead. Yeah, that's right. Yeah.
Good tip.
All right. Yeah.
A reminder to be safe, and also they can't hurt anyone.
Yeah.
That is an important part, though. Mount Auburn Cemetery and the Hawk. There's just so many spots. I'd love to see what other people say.
Yeah, everyone feel free to chime in. So I guess, we don't have a ton of time. And if anybody wants to jump in with some questions, feel free to type them in. Beth's monitoring the chat and she'll pick some out. But I guess I do, since we're a historical society, I want to talk a little bit about Cambridge history. And obviously Cambridge is historic, sure, Rev War, et cetera, but we're making history up until today, right? We're hoping a vaccine comes out of Cambridge, a COVID vaccine. But do you think it's something that we do well here? Is it something you think about? Is it something that adds to your pride of the city? What do you think about how history is done here or not?
I have a thought on that. Do you have a thought on that, Zolan?
Go ahead.
Well, it circles back to Zolan's very important comments about, this is an incredibly progressive city, but there can be a lot of improvement. And he has another cousin who's a nephew who, when that nephew was living here, we spent a lot more time, in the towers over Fresh Pond. His friends lived in different areas than, a lot of kids that I'd previously met here. And I would meet kids who had no clue what was going on in the rest of the city. And I think that kind of applies to the history too. I'm wondering if, especially given the moment that we're in, there needs to be kind of a revamping of the markers. I noticed that there's a marker on Story Street, a Black woman who was an activist. I'm just wondering if there should be thinking about that, the Black history of the city. And it may be that it's there and I haven't seen it as much. Shame on me. But I just think of those kids a lot, and they didn't seem to have a lot to point to as something that reflected them.
I think that's a great point. I think it's really astute. There's people are going to have different records of history depending on where they grow up in this city, right? And where they're living and their living situation as well. So, one person's, I'm describing Cambridge not as a kind of objective view, but more so it's very subjective, right? This is just my experience and how I see the city. But I guarantee you that's probably different than for somebody else that, wasn't as lucky as me to get to have some of the opportunities that I had. And sometimes, So whenever, I'm always curious when it comes to anybody that is responsible for recording history, kind of who the voices are that are involved in that organization that are recording history. And whether or not it's reflective of the city in general. I think that's something that you could be really, everybody, any organization could be really conscious of. Are you reflecting kind of what it's like to grow up in, near Harvard Square exclusively, or possibly Newtown Court, or down the coast, or, in the towers as well, and in between, and mid Cambridge or what have you. So I think that would be, that's something to explore, right? I mean, as we've learned, especially from the past couple years, I mean, going to the place I work for, I mean, the Times just won a Pulitzer last year for writing a story that revamped history by looking and focusing on voices that had long been neglected. And it turned out that the way that, the 1619 Project described American history was one that a lot of kids actually didn't hear or learn about, while they were, going through school. So I would love to see some of that, diversity, not just when it comes to race, but also experiences and kind of where you grow up in this city, and the situations that you grow up in, reflected in the way that we're recording the history of this city too.
Mm-hmm. Right on. Beth, I'm wondering if you can let us know about anything that's happening in the chat box. Any questions?
Sure. So we have our first question says, I've been in Cambridge since 1983, wondering if you guys, Robin and or Zolan, think it has changed for the better or declined, and if so, how?
Would you like to go first?
Sure. Especially since, Frank is here. Well, there's a lot that's great. I'm going to sound, I can remember when. I mean, I remember when the whole Kendall Square area, when Lechmere was there, it was just lot after lot of just, garbage and junk and weeds and everything. And, all this growth in the biotech industry. I know that that's been great. But I also think the character of the squares is just, my guy founded something called Cambridge Local First with people like Frank and Rachel Solom and Michael and Elizabeth from Cambridge Naturals. And I just, maybe it's because I'm so conscious of Harvard Square, but I just think there's a lot of soul killing going on. Porter Square has some wonderful, bookstore and the, tags. And, actually Simon was a part of this, trying to put the medallions in the window for locally owned businesses. But when the rents shoot up, when Harvard brings in, big box chain stores, what was the one that was above the Tasty? God, it was some, when all the people look sexy and they wear a t-shirt and that's it. I mean, the one I mean. Anyway, they're paying for their rent out of their advertising dollars. They're not trying to sell t-shirts to pay their rent. They just want to put the Harvard Square on their shopping bags. And to allow those chain stores to come in and get rid of the Tasty. And, I know business is business, but I really think we need to make more demands of Harvard and other huge money makers in the area, that they have to invest in the infrastructure as well to keep some of that character, because nobody's going to want to come to Harvard Square if there's no Harvard Square there. We've been waiting for a movie theater for years now. And so I on that level, I mean, I think there's a lot that's wonderful, and there's great growth, and there's a lot of vitality, but I also think we're killing the goose.
And just to add to that, those are all, great points, and I couldn't agree more. But I'm also... it
was Abercrombie, by the way. Everybody's going, it was Abercrombie and Fitch. Yeah. Okay, go ahead. Yeah, go ahead.
I'm also just worried that a lot of the friends that the people I grew up with, if we rewind it today with our current market, I don't think a lot of the people I grew up with would be able to kind of live in Cambridge. I'm also just worried about people getting pushed out. I think it's an issue that, throughout the US, everyone is dealing with. I live in DC now, and gentrification is definitely a polarizing topic here. It was in Brooklyn before, but, I think that's something that I'm really concerned about in Cambridge too. Because I think that's when you're going to start to lose some of those benefits that I talked about in the beginning, when I described going to a school where it felt like you could meet anyone from anywhere. I mean, you're not going to have that if you continue to push, certain people out of the city.
Not just low-income housing, but affordable housing.
That's right.
Yeah.
We have another question that actually folds in a second question. So, Zolan, how did growing up in Cambridge help you prepare for the work that you are doing and the issues that you're covering today? And yes, because someone else asked this right before, what is it like to cover the Trump administration?
Okay. So I'll do the first one and then I'm going to flip the second one. But I think the thing I kind of come back to, I've been asked this before, is I'm very comfortable going and interviewing a migrant at the border, a refugee who just came, who just got resettled, an immigration advocate, an immigration lawyer, and turning around and 30 minutes later going and interviewing a Border Patrol agent, going and interviewing a member of ICE, or a member of DHS. And I think that I'm able to, or at least I strive to, approach each of those subjects with empathy and an open mind to the best of my ability. I think that's something that was groomed in this city. You're going to grow up with people who have, police officers in their family, who have firefighters in their family. You're also going to grow up with folks or in areas that may be subject to certain over-policing or over-enforcement as well. So the ability to be aware of both of those perspectives, I think has really informed not as much my reporting, but my approach to reporting, which is to kind of have an open mind and empathy, which I think is important in these times. Plus, I'm comfortable traveling and I'm comfortable going and meeting different people, which I find, other people from small homogenous towns, I'm surprised it's not always the same thing. It can be hard for people to hop on a plane. So I think I'm very comfortable getting uncomfortable, which I think I got in this city. The second question, I'd be much more curious to actually flip it and hear how whoever asked it thinks we're doing covering the Trump administration. I'll still answer your question, but I'm much more interested in your insights. Whoever it was.
Amy.
Uh-oh.
I was the one who asked it.
Hello.
Hi. I am just fascinated by, well, I don't even know if that's the right word, but I can't even believe what I'm seeing sometimes in the news. And I can't imagine how confusing it must be to be a reporter covering the White House or dealing with the Trump administration. They seem to waffle a lot. I think there's not a lot of communication or coordination probably going on internally, but so that's what I see. I don't necessarily think that's a function of reporting. Mm-hmm. That's a function of, what you're covering. Mm-hmm. I don't know. That's why I was so curious. I wanted to know, what must it be like to be in the fray like that and have to navigate all that?
Yeah, I mean, thank you for your response too. I mean, these are, it is hectic. It seems hectic because it is hectic. If it seems like there's miscommunication, or you at times read a piece and you just think, wow, like it really can't be this, there has to be more coordination than this, right? I mean, this is the federal government. There has to be, it can't seem this chaotic. It is that chaotic. I mean, we talk to people often in which they express that. I think the pandemic has exposed it, but I think it was there before. So yeah, I mean, what's it like? It's, I don't know, I'm almost struggling to answer this. I know, I mean, for my beat, last year it was mainly immigration and the border. That's a primary agenda item for the president. So it was busy, involved a lot of traveling. It also involved a lot of pressing of the federal government and trying to find truth and then, do some investigations. And now it's everything from whether or not the people that are most powerful in this country are willing to condemn, or let alone what are they going to do about it, but condemn domestic terrorism and white supremacy, to one day you're doing that, to another day you're covering the refugee cap getting to its lowest level since World War II, to another day you're just trying to find time to also make sure that you're not just putting out news stories, but you're also showing the human impact of it as well, and trying to show some enterprise. So I really appreciate your answer, because I think it shows too that, there's still a need for some of those stories to show the human impact of this chaotic kind of response. So.
Yeah.
So I actually have a question that I would love to ask, and it may be, I know we're approaching the end, maybe a good way to start our wrap up, but so we at Cambridge Historical Society have started, we're embarking on what we hope is going to be a long and fruitful partnership with some students at CRLS. And we had a program earlier in the summer where a couple of classes, some students and a teacher talked to us about their experiences writing what they called the pandemic post. And it was basically writing and artwork and recipes and workout tips and study tips, all kinds of things for each other, and what they would say to each other and advice they would give each other about surviving and getting by in the pandemic and their experiences. So we were thrilled to have them, and they talked about a lot more of their experiences and the Black Lives Matter movement and everything. So my question is, what would both of you give us as advice to, cultivating this relationship and to empowering these young people to be the creators and, documenters of history, and making sure that we have, as a city, a full and varied archive of what especially young people are thinking and experiencing?
Zolan, go.
First of all, that sounds great. I mean, that's a great initiative. So, happy to hear that. I'm also happy to if I can put you in touch with anyone. Well, it sounds like you're fine, but if I can help in any way, let me know. But I would consider paying them if that's a possibility. Young people need money. Just put that out there. I would also consider, if there's a mutual benefit that they can have. It can be hard for, I think, a young person to, see experience as a benefit. So if you can, focus on emphasizing that this will look good for college, that this will be a great extracurricular to have on your profile as you look to, go to the next level, that can be great. And then I guess I would just have an open mind about what history is, right? I mean, it goes back to a point I think my aunt made earlier. For some people, history might be that when they think of a history of Cambridge and, this time in the pandemic, I don't know, or Cambridge in general, they might think of that mural behind what used to be Harvest, as opposed to Harvard Square and whatnot. So I would just have an open mind, and I guess allow each person to bring their own definition of this to the table. I'm sorry if I strayed there on
No, that's great. Because you reminded me of something. I'm talking about this stuff. I'm talking about ancient history. The tasty, and as you mentioned, the mural, and I think it's great to have a way to connect kids from Cambridge to that. That Bob Dylan did play at. I mean, they may not even know who he is, but what the performing theater used to be like before it was the movie theater, or that just even the most recent history is really ancient history. Them, I always remind myself. I work with a lot of people who are much younger than me. And I always am reminding myself that in the 60s, when I was kind of, coming of age and, I was in my teens, if anyone had said to me, well, let's go back 50 years, which would be like 1910. And there's a song that I really like from 1910. It would have been a Flapper song or something. I would have been like, I don't care. Now, it's a very different world. Like, kids are growing up and they're hearing the music from 50 years ago. Eddie Van Halen dies and it's like front page news. So the way we even look at history and what's historic and what's still part of our consciousness is completely different. In the 60s, there's no way we weren't even looking at World War II, which we should have. It was much more recent history, as young people. So I like this notion that, I don't know, even reminding them of what we don't even think of as history, but is history for them most recently. And, the only other thing I'd say is that I love what you're doing with young people. When I went to the first Black Lives Matter protest on the Common, they had these incredible speakers from Ridge, very young. And the one thing they said was, how come in school I'm only learning about Rosa Parks and Martin Luther King? How come? There's got to be more than that. So I think they're hungry for more history.
Yeah, I hear that. I'm mindful of the time and knowing that journalists have many obligations and are exhausted. And so we want to protect you coming into this election season.
Can I just ask Zolan one thing? Because it's like I get to talk to him. So Zolan, when I went to see Zolan at his at the New York Times Bureau in DC, I was like fangirl, because, oh my God, there's Maureen Dowd, and oh my God, you sit next to Maggie Haberman. But Michael Shear is a colleague of yours, and I'm just curious, Michael Shear is one of the top reporters, and he contracted the coronavirus at that Rose Garden thing. Has any contact tracing person ever reached him
From
yet?
the White House?
Yeah.
So he went on CNN yesterday and said that there had been no attempt by the White House to do any contact tracing with him yet. So
his wife is sick too, right?
His wife got confirmed with the coronavirus earlier this week. Yeah.
Unbelievable.
Meanwhile, he's still been reporting. He had that great scoop on Jeff Sessions being one of the people to push forward on zero tolerance of family separation. So
we have to take away the babies. Yeah. Well, I tell you, I'm like a fangirl. There you are with, this is the most respected journalists in the country. And I'm really proud of you.
Oh,
Zolan, I'm wondering if you're going to make the CRLS graduate Wikipedia page, if that's like a marker of success.
Can't you self-edit it? Should I just do it after this?
Probably happened right now over the course of this.
Yeah, you can just edit it if you'd like.
Well, also while we have you, Zolan, inquiring minds want to know about your film, Jahar.
Oh, yes. Yeah.
Plans?
Yeah. So after Jahar, Henry and I got together and we wrote Rogers and Tilden, which is a short film. It premiered at Tribeca Film Festival, and it won the March on Washington Film Festival in DC. It was based off some reporting I did in New York about formerly incarcerated reintegration into society. And while that was going on, we wrote a feature script with a title right now that's called Cambridge. And it is a feature screenplay that's on the same topic in terms that Jahar was on, but instead of composite characters, it is on actually real people, not me, not Henry, but some of our other friends. That won the Nantucket Film Festival screenwriting contest, and we're in we have a producer and casting producer, and we're in the process pre-production, but everything's halted because of COVID. So it's all 2020 election right now.
Yeah, I bet. Well, I had one closing question that just your gut check for both of you. What would the next best thing for Cambridge be? What should it be? What do you think? What would you like Cambridge to achieve or become famous for?
Zolan Kanno-Youngs. Wait, that was a joke. The biotech we know is looming and coming, but I don't know. I hope it's something more from the humanities, I guess. Yeah.
I don't know. That is a really tough question.
Good question.
It's a great question. I mean, I'm trying to think of some of the flaws that, impact our entire country right now. having no confirmed cases of COVID would be great. A vaccine would be great, just for everyone else. It'd be good to have Cambridge do that. I would love, something like that. I don't know. My little brother is at Cambridge and Latin right now. So I would love, for selfish reasons, for his graduating class to have 100% or the best GPA, in like Ridge history. That's completely selfish. So, yeah.
Canterbridgians will save the world.
Yeah.
Well, I want to say thank you again. This has been such a fun conversation, and it exactly embodies what we're hoping to do here at the Society. And just hearing your perspectives have been so interesting, and can't thank you enough to both of you for giving of your time in such a crazy world. It was nice to just pause and hear what you had to say. And thank you to our audience, as usual, so beautiful and wonderful. And we really appreciate your showing up and participating and being on this historical adventure with us. I hope that Cambridge has, the best and most revolutionary historical organization in the country. And that's something that we're working towards. So thank you to everyone. Thank you to Robin, Zolan, this is the second of 4 events, so we still have 2 more coming up. We have Coach Mike Jarvis next week, and then we have Robert Pinsky, so not nobodies joining us. And if you have ideas of other people, please send them our way. So thank you again to everyone, and we're going to say good night.
Thank you.
Have a good night. Bye, everybody.
Bye, Mom.